advanced rhythm strips. I do have a couple of websites that you can utilize here to practice, to continue to practice, especially the ones that we're gonna be talking about today, more advanced rhythm strips. And with the 12 lead EKG, and it covers what we're gonna be focusing on with 12 lead EKG, and then talking about ACLS here, if you wanna read ahead. There's a little section on ACLS and the different algorithms that we'll be talking about are all combined in one giant module. Okay, so going back to our rhythm strip, one thing that we have to be able to do, especially in the monitoring rule, we have to be able to identify those rhythms that denote a significant change, and especially those rhythms that are significant because they are life-threatening. We have to be able to identify these rhythms that require us to intervene because something significant is going on. Now, just to remind ourselves, these are the rhythm strips that we have discussed. We have the sinus rhythms. And what are my sinus rhythms? Who can remind me what my sinus rhythms are? Okay, not regular rhythm,
Normal sinus.
normal sinus.
Sinus Brady.
Give me just a second, normal sinus. Sinus Brady,
Sinus tachycardia.
sinus tach. Sinus tachycardia,
Sinus arrest.
sinus arrest. Also sinus pause, same thing. What else?
Sinus block.
Sinus block. And one more.
Sinus arrhythmia.
Sinus arrhythmia, very good. Okay, so those are our sinus rhythms. After we went through the sinus rhythms, we also went to then atrial rhythms. And what were my atrial rhythms?
Atrial flutter.
Before that even, what was our first one? Atrial tachycardia. What else? AFib, aflutter, as Tosh already said. And we read a little bit about wandering atrial pacemaker. This just means that the P wave changes shape. P waves that sometimes, you have one P wave for every QRS, but sometimes the P wave looks like one and then it looks like, it just changes its shape. You have to have at least 3 or more P waves in different shapes that wandering atrial pacemaker. It just changes, the P waves aren't always, they're always in the same place, they always have the same PR interval, they always have the same PR ratio, it's just that the P waves look different. What else did we have?
Ventricle.
Junctional, that's right, we have junctional rhythms. And what are my junctional rhythms?
Junction rhythm.
Junctional,
Accelerated.
accelerated junctional,
Junction tachy.
and junctional tachy.
Junction escape.
And yes, with junctional, we also have a junctional escape, which is a very slow, oops. We used to call it junctional Brady, but that made no sense, it's just called junctional escape when it drops below 40. Okay? Then what did we have?
Ventricular rhythms.
Ventricular. And what are my ventricular rhythms?
Idioventricular.
What else?
Accelerated.
Accelerated what?
Ventricular.
Not ventricular, idioventricular.
Idioventricular.
Then what?
Tachy. Ventricular tachy.
Ventricular tach or VTach. And VFib and it's weird that it's listed under here, but it's listed as a ventricular rhythm.
Systole.
Asystole. And what do we call very, very slow idioventricular rhythms?
Agonal.
Agonal, that's right. So like junctional escape, agonal rhythms are very slow idioventricular rhythms. Okay. And what did we end with?
AV blocks.
AV blocks or heart blocks. And what are my AV blocks? First degree,
Second degree type 1.
second degree type 1, also known as Mobitz 1, also known as Winky Bach. What's the second one? Or what's the next one?
Second degree type 2.
Also known as Mobitz 2. It doesn't get a cool name like Winky Bach. And then the last one is
Third degree or complete heart block.
very good. So those are the rhythms that we discussed last semester. Okay. And if you remember, each rhythm has a specific set of rules that it has to follow in order to be called that rhythm. If one of those rules is broken, can it be that rhythm anymore? No, you have to dump the rhythm. For example, what is one very specific rhythm about ventricular tachycardias? The QRS is what? Wide bizarre. What else? What's another rule? Heart rate above 100?
It's regular.
There's no P waves. It's regular. Very good. It's a wide bizarre QRS complex with a fast heart rate. No P waves. Okay. Very, very regular. At the same time, if they say VFib, what are the rules for VFib?
Completely irregular.
Completely irregular. Do I have Q waves? Do I have QRSs? No. Do I have P waves? Do I have any real structure to the rhythm? No. Very good. If I say Winky Bach block, what are the rules of Winky Bach block?
The
The PR interval
interval
increases,
PR interval changes,
and then all of a sudden the QRS. is
and
dropped.
one QR, not one beat, just one QRS is dropped, because you still have to have the P wave. Okay. It's an irregular rhythm in which the P to R ratio, P to R interval increases until one drops, and then the pattern starts over again. What's sinus tachycardia?
100.
Heart rate's over 100,
Regular.
and it's regular. What else?
P-wave, QRS.
Normal P wave, normal QRS, normal PR interval, normal QRS duration. Everything else is normal. Okay, just a little bit fast, to about 160. Switch to something else. If I say AFib, what does that mean? Grossly irregular.
There are no P waves.
There's no P waves. Instead, my baseline is just kind of wiggling.
QRS is well, like regular.
QRSs generally or normally are narrow, or normal duration. Normally, it can be a little bit different. We'll talk about that next time. Okay, so each of these has a rule. Sinus arrhythmia. It's irregular, but it's irregular in what way? Well, we can't do that unless we see it. But it's irregular in what way? There's something special about.
When the person breathes.
Yeah, it slowly speeds up and it slowly slows down. Because we could also say that sinus block is also irregular. But the difference between sinus block and sinus arrhythmia, sinus block, all of a sudden I just lose it and complete cardiac cycle. Everything's regular until that cardiac cycle loses. Whereas sinus arrhythmia, it's irregular because my heart rate speeds up and slows down in a pattern equal to breathing. So each of these has a very specific rule. Which ones on here are most concerning to you as you think about them?
VTAC.
VFib, VTAC, sinus rest, actually more than sinus block, sinus arrest. No one's worried about asystole? I mean, asystole should be kind of up there. That's kind of one to be worried about. A-flutter and AFib. Why are A-flutter and AFib concerning? No? Blood clots, that's right. Because with A-flutter and AFib, well, A-flutter is less concerning, but AFib is the most concerning. The atria isn't really contracting. The atrial appendage we talked about today isn't contracting. The blood will sit in that little cone trabeculated space and clot. And if that person ever comes out of AFib and that heart contracts nice and powerfully, that clot will shower and you're going to have a significant issue. So let's do a little thing here. So I have these little flip cards. Let's try that again. I have these little flip cards here. And these little flip cards, I can flip over to tell you exactly what they are. Okay? So, I'm not going to go through all of these. Let's look at number 1. What do you think number 1 is? Chandler, what do you think about number 1?
It looks very good.
It looks very good, okay.
Just looks kind of weird.
It does go up there. Does this mean anything to us though?
No.
What causes that?
Movement.
Yeah, movement, some sort of movement.
It looks like
Normal sinus? What's the rate?
Probably slow.
I think Salisbury.
About around 40, right? So is it normal sinus?
No,
What would it be?
sinus breathing.
Sinus brady. So remember, if it doesn't match everything exactly, can it be that? No, it cannot. This would be normal sinus rhythm if it had a faster rate. Okay? 4, 8,
It's
12, 6, 8. It's
Close.
It is a sinus bradycardia. Remember, to be first degree, you have to be greater than 0.20. So this is sinus bradycardia. Okay, let's see, which other one do I want here?
That's gonna be cool, huh? Flip around.
Let's see here. Number 4. Number 4 will go to, I did this side at Agar. Number 4. This one right here.
Oh, that's up.
Can she phone a friend?
No, I just want her to try to, let her try first. VTAC? Okay, well, let's take a look at that. In order to be VTAC, I have to have a couple of rules. What are my rules for VTAC?
It's gotta be wide and bizarre.
I have to have a wide QRS complex. So let's take a look at this QRS complex. This QRS complex is for 8 seconds. Is that a wide QRS complex?
No.
Wide QRS complex has to be greater than point what? 0.12. So this is a narrow complex. It's tall, but it's narrow. So it's not VTAC. Although, do we all agree that it's fast?
Yes.
Yes, it is fast, but it doesn't have the wide QRS complex. And remember the rule, if I don't match exactly, I can't be that. Let's see here, I'm gonna go back over here. Stacy, what do you think?
SVT, or I mean, tachycardia.
What type?
Junctional.
Junctional, okay. Junctional tachycardia, also said SVT, I bet they say SVT here, but technically it is junctional tachycardia because I can still, there's still enough space here that if there was a P wave, I should still be able to see the P wave because 0.20, 4, 8, 12, it's right about here. So remember, SVT is only used if you can't tell if it's junctional or atrial tach. But SV, supraventricular tachycardia or junctional tachycardia is probably what this one is.
SVT is used when you can't tell.
It's so fast, it could, the P wave and the T wave would fuse together and you wouldn't be able to tell which one it is. Usually around 180 beats per minute is when you see that. So this one's a little bit low to be called SVT. We should be able to determine if it's junctional or atrial. Let's look at $25. Stephanie, 25.
I would say that is atrial flutter.
And why do you say atrial flutter?
I'd say that because it's got the sawtooth pattern.
But it's irregular.
It's irregular. I'd say it was variable rate,
That's
atrial
right.
rate.
A flutter can be irregular. A flutter can be regular or irregular. A fib always has to be what?
Regular.
Irregular. A fib always has to be irregular. A flutter can be regular or irregular. Variable or stable rates. And so this is atrial flutter. Okay. It could be what we call pseudo flutter too, but that's more advanced for EP. Okay, because of the size of the P waves. Let's see another one here. Same thing there. Let's do 34 is a little tricky. 34, Tosha.
Is it sinus arrhythmia?
Arrhythmia. That is correct. It is sinus arrhythmia.
How did you know that, Tasha? There's a big space right there.
Yeah,
How
but
come you said-
you can't have one entire cycle in
It's
between.
not big enough for an entire cardiac cycle. Remember, for block, you have to have an entire cardiac cycle to be able to fit in that space. P wave, it doesn't fit. Also, you notice that the QRS waveforms get further apart from each other. And then
it
get
comes
closer
back.
together. So it's a slow down and a speed up transition.
Isn't she smart?
Pretty smart.
That's
Okay.
awesome.
So let's take a look at another one here. We're gonna start at the back. Vanessa, junctional. Why do you say junctional? No P wave. Is it junctional?
Accelerated.
Accelerated junction.
40 to 60.
40 to 60, yeah. This is accelerated junctional. If we count it out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's above 60. It's just above 60. So we'd call this accelerated junctional. Just a little bit above 60 beats per minute. Oh, very good. Accelerated junctional. Okay.
So accelerated junctional is same as accelerated idioventricular?
Accelerated idioventricular is 40 to 100. Let's see, Jen, what is 46? What do you think 46 is? Atrial flutter. Well, in order to have atrial flutter, I need to see something still. What do I still need to see? I need to see QRS complexes. Do I see QRS complexes up here? I don't have QRS complexes, so it can't be atrial flutter. Anyone else have an idea?
VFib,
VFib?
Course VFib?
VFib. What are the rules for VFib?
regular.
Yeah, Grossly
Large
enjoy-
ventricular.
with VFib, is there any QRS complexes?
No, nothing is there.
Is there any HOA forms?
No.
All I have is a wiggly line. I have no structure whatsoever to it. It's just a complete wiggly line. So ventricular fibrillation. 49. Stephanie, I went to. Kim, 49.
Tricky.
49 is a little bit weird.
Yeah.
Probably not the best example of 49, but.
Well, the QRSs are quite wide here.
Mhm.
The P, seems to be really far from the beginning of the QRS. Everything looks to be fairly regular to me, happening regularly. So because it's wide, I wanna say that it's a ventricular type of a rhythm, like an idioventricular, but it's not crazy.
Can I have idioventricular with P waves?
No, so that's why I'm thinking maybe it's a first degree AV.
Okay. It's a first degree AV block with other cardiac problems, but
Okay.
this person also has a bundle branch block that we'll talk about next semester. This is more of a tricky one. This is more of a classic first degree heart block right here, the long PR interval. Let's see, 51, Harrison.
What's the middle one?
Yep.
Silent arrhythmia?
Is that arrhythmia? Does everyone agree with that?
No.
AFib.
AFib, so I have sinus arrhythmia, I have AFib. Any other ideas? This is atrial fibrillation. Now, a couple places it looks like there's a P wave, but if you look at everything else, it doesn't plot out that way. So there's a couple of places that it looks like there could be a P wave. It's grossly irregular, and if you look at the, especially in this position right here, especially in this longer position, you notice that the baseline is really just wavy. The things that look like P waves are just waves, more prominent waves in the rhythm strip. So this would be atrial fibrillation. Tanya, did I do you, Tanya, yet? Okay, Tanya, 66.
I would say it's 3rd-degree.
Third degree heart block? What do I need to have for a third degree heart block?
P waves.
Would you have one QRS?
I need to have one QRSs, but what else do I need?
You have to miss,
No,
more.
no.
We need a period.
Yeah, P wave, with third degree, remember, my QRSs have a rate and my P waves have a faster rate. I would have to see more P waves than QRSs. The P waves are a faster regular rhythm, QRSs are a slow regular rhythm, but they don't match up. This can't be third degree.
Is it,
Any other ideas?
Video junction.
Accelerated ventricular junctional. Well, in order to be junctional, what do my QRSs have to be?
Narrow.
Narrow. So this is, they say this is I would say this is actually an accelerated idioventricular. They say it's a junctional rhythm, but the QRSs are wide. I don't always agree with this
That's
website, but.
So like, when
Weird
we
that they
don't
said
have a
that.
P
Yeah.
waves, doesn't the P waves always, junctional rhythm?
Nope. Because if you, with the what do you mean? If with an idioventricular rhythm,
We
you
don't
don't have
have
P
a
waves
P
either.
waves.
With idioventricular, you don't have P waves either. Idioventricular, matter of fact, you can't have a P wave with idioventricular.
So what answer?
No, you don't have
I would
the
say first
inverted
degree.
P waves with the idioventricular?
You would not, no.
No?
You could have a retrograde, but not inverted. Let's see here, another one here. What's 82, Shema? Asystole, very good. Asystole. 85, Edgar, what is 85? What's that? No? '85. VTAC, ventricular tachycardia. When is our QRS complexes that are very regular and fast.
What was 83? Sorry, 86.
That'd be junctional. Accelerated junctional. Let's see here. What's 98?
Sinus.
Type
Sinus block.
2.
Type 2? Well, in order to be a type 2, during the space here, what would I have to see?
P wave.
I'd have to have a P wave. Do I have a P wave in that space? No, I do not. So it can't be any of my degrees.
Sinus block.
Sinus arrest,
Block. One.
sinus block.
Only one is missing,
Only
right?
one is missing. This is sinus pause or sinus arrest. If we go from here to here, we can fit more than one in. More junctionals, that's not what I want. 139,
Flutter. Atrial flutter.
atrial flutter. That's correct. And it's regular, so we could say exact block. One 173. That's 173. VFib. Some say VTAC, VFib. In order to be VTAC, what would I have to have?
QRS.
I'd have to have a regular rhythm. And you can see that these are not regular, they change in duration. That's VFib. This is VTAC here. Okay, so again, just a little bit of a toy that we can play around with, that we can go through and test ourselves. So those are the rhythms that we have discussed. Now there are a couple things we have not discussed yet. There's a couple situations that we have not gone into. And the first situation that we haven't gone into is what we call premature complexes. Okay, a premature complex. Now, before we go on, a premature complex is not an interpretation. It is something we have to add to an interpretation. Any rhythm can have, well, except for a few, any rhythm except for VTAC and VFib and asystole could have a premature complex. And technically, you can with AFib, but with AFib, it would be very hard. And also a flutter. With AFib and a flutter, it would be very hard to identify a premature complex, just because they can be both can be irregular, so it would be very hard to identify a premature complex. In the EP world, there are ways that we can identify when a premature complex occurs in those two cases, but for our situation, it would just be really complicated to do. But you can have a premature complex in almost any rhythm. So what do we mean by a premature complex? A premature complex basically means that we have a cardiac cycle To be premature means you are coming earlier than you are expected. So a premature complex is any time we have a cardiac cycle that occurs earlier than we expect it to. Now, there are three types of premature complexes. We have premature atrial complex, that we call PACs. Oops. We have premature junctional complexes. That we refer to as PJCs. And we also have a premature ventricular complex, what we call PVCs. Now notice I'm very purposeful in my terminology. These are premature complexes. Some people will incorrectly call these premature contractions. We should not call them premature contractions. Why should we not call them premature contractions? It's electrical and not mechanical. Okay, we can only say that electrically there is an incident that occurred. We can't tell for sure that the heart actually contracted. So that is why we call them premature complexes and not contractions. PAC, PJC, and PVC. Okay. So in other words, this is a situation in which we have a rhythm that occurs earlier than it should. Now there's a way to differentiate these from each other, because if I have something that appears before it really should, how do I tell if it's a PAC, a PJC, or a PVC? Before we start looking at them, is there a way I can start trying to guess which one it is? And the answer is yes. A PAC will have a normal QRS and a P wave. A normal P wave. A premature junctional complex will have a normal QRS, and most of the time, guess what it will not have?
P wave.
It will not have a P wave. And a premature ventricular complex would have what type of QRS? And it also would have no P wave.
Just one cardiac cycle.
Was that?
One cardiac cycle this week.
Most of the time, and we'll talk about that in a second. So I'm going to give you an example, a quick example here. Now, if we look at 21, I purposely jumped over 21. If we look at 21, what do we notice here? Is there something that seems out of place?
QRS,
Which one looks out of place?
That one.
the last third one.
1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth one, right? Now, what do we notice about it? First of all, is it occurring where it should? Well, we can try to figure that out. If we go from here to here, this is where this is the normal cycle. My next P wave shouldn't occur until right here. So what is this thing doing?
It's coming.
It's coming earlier. It's before it should. So not only is it really weird looking, it's occurring before it's supposed to occur. So whenever something comes before it occurs before it should, we say that it is premature. So now we have to say, okay, we have one beat. So the first thing I need to do though is I'm going to try to figure out what's underneath that beat. what would this patient have if they didn't have this premature beat? So I'm gonna cover this up, and I'm gonna pretend this isn't here. If this wasn't here, what would the person's cardiac rhythm be?
Normal sinus rhythm.
This would be normal sinus rhythm. So that's the first thing. It's not normal sinus rhythm, but it would have been. So I would say this is a sinus rhythm with a premature. Now we have to figure out what type of premature it is. Because remember, a premature complex is not an interpretation, it's added to the interpretation. So if this wasn't here, I'd have a normal sinus rhythm. So because I have it there, it is a sinus rhythm with a premature, and now the question is what type of premature? I look at the QRS complex. Is the QRS complex narrow or wide?
Wide.
Wide. So if the QRS complex is wide, well, I go back to my rules here. And my rules state that a wide QRS complex means that it is a premature ventricular complex. So what I would say about this is I would say that the patient has normal sinus rhythm with how many PVCs? One, because you could have more than one. This is a normal sinus rhythm with one PVC.
You denote how many.
You would want to tell us how many. Because believe it or not, people say, are PVCs, what a premature complex means is there's an area of muscle tissue that's irritated, that's firing before it's supposed to. That's what a premature complex is. It's an irritated muscle tissue that's firing before it's supposed to. Now, we all have premature complexes throughout the day. All of us do. If I hook you up to a Holter monitor right now, all of us would have PACs or PJCs, or some of us would even have PVCs. How many of you have ever felt like a quick flutter in your chest? Like a butterfly? That's a premature complex that you're feeling. That little, sometimes you just feel like a little in your chest. That's a premature complex of some sort. And most of us have those throughout the day. So the biggest concern we have is not that you have it, the question is how many do you have? If you have frequent, which is more than about 2 to 3 per minute, that's concerning because something's really irritated there. How many of you drink energy drinks? If you drink an energy drink, I can guarantee you that you're having PV or premature complexes. The caffeine in energy drinks, caffeine is one of the causes of premature complexes or tissues firing before they should.
I mean, you feel like your heart go faster, right?
Yeah, well, your heart going faster is not just because of premature complexes. That's what caffeine does. So let me see here. Let's do another one here. That's the PVC. Sore thumb earlier here. When I start looking for it, then of course I can't find it. Come back to that one. Okay. Where'd it go? Okay, so let's take a look at this one. There's something weird about this one.
Which one?
99, red balloons. For those of you who don't know, that was a famous song in the 80s, 99 balloons. It's about nuclear war, it had a catchy theme. Anyways, let's look at 99. And what do you notice about it?
Extra P waves.
Yeah, there's extra lots of things. So we have things that look like this and things that look like this, okay? So what we can say about this is a normal heart rate should be nice and equally spaced out, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Do I have things nice and equally spaced out here?
No.
No. However, if I got rid of this, and this, what would I have?
Sinus ready.
But it would be nice and spaced out, wouldn't I? If I got rid of this, and I got rid of this, and I got rid of this, everything else looks the same and is nicely spaced out. Does that make sense? Do you see that? The only reason why everything is not nice and spaced out is I have this dude, and this dude, and this dude. If you notice, it's not over here. There's not another one over here. This one, and this one is what compared to everybody else? They're early. Notice this last beat does not have the premature beat. If it was supposed to be, if this was normal, we would see it happen right here as well, but it doesn't. So this one and these right here have to be my normal beats, because this one looks like this one, which looks like this one, which looks like this one, and this one doesn't have this weird beat after it. So that is my normal beat. So underlying, what does this patient have?
PAC?
Well, underlying, what is the underlying rhythm? Bradycardia. This is bradycardia. What type of bradycardia? Well, sinus bradycardia. Then we say, well, why isn't this just sinus bradycardia? Well, that's because I have these three yahoos, and what are these three yahoos doing? They're coming in before they're supposed to. My next beat was supposed to come in here. This guy didn't want to wait, so he's premature. He's occurring before he's supposed to. He's supposed to wait till right there, but he didn't want to. He was supposed to wait till he's right here. He didn't want to. He was supposed to wait till then. He didn't want to. So we have a premature beat. So I have sinus brady and a premature beat. And I have to ask myself, what type of premature beat do I have? I go back to my rules. Does my QRS widen bizarre on these beats?
No.
No, they are not. Do I have a P wave on those beats?
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. So what type of premature beats are these?
Atrial.
Atrial. So I would say this is sinus bradycardia with 3 PACs, or premature atrial complexes. What do you notice about these atrial complexes, though? What makes them different? There's a lot of them, aren't they?
Yeah.
Are they occurring in a pattern?
No. Yes.
Well, it's not 3 PACs just periodically occurring every now and then. It's 3 PACs that's occurring after every normal beat, isn't it? Do you think the doctor would want to know that?
Yes.
If I say you had 3 PACs, if I had 3 PACs distributed here with a heart rate this fast, that's not a big deal. But if I had 3 PACs displayed here when the heart rate's this slow, then that's more concerning. The majority of my beats are PACs in this case. So there would be a good way to tell the doctor, hey doc, you have a lot, this patient's having PACs, but they're having a lot of them. And we'll talk about that after we get back from break. So go for a quick break and we'll talk about special terms with multiple premature complexes.
So you would say 3 consecutive.
No, there's a word that we would say. We just say, right now we're just saying 3 PACs. There is a term that we'll come up with in a second,
Okay.
but right now we're just gonna say 3 PACs. Or right now is in the next 5 minutes.
He had lead.
You know, when I was going through Christmas music withdrawal, just me. Okay. Just wondering.
Premature junction complex also we won't have a P wave,
Yeah,
right?
we'll see in a second. I'll show you that in a second. Not a normal P wave. I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. Okay. Waiting for Jen. Okay.
You want to stay?
Stephanie, could you send me, oh no, never mind, not you. Kim already sent me hers. You already sent me the, yeah, okay. You did send me, you sent me the paperwork.
Except for that thing that I said.
Yeah, that's it, that's it, yeah,
Okay.
don't worry about it.
So is sign it Paul, sign it arrest the same meaning?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Sign it escape essentially, or that, or
There's no
different?
such thing, sinus block is not, sinus